Long ago, in the quiet and loving village of Ezoba, people lived like one big family, caring for one another with hearts full of warmth. Ezoba was a breathtaking place, nestled between soft rolling green hills where tall raffia palms swayed and whispered secrets to the breeze, and a mellow river hummed a gentle tune as it slid over smooth stones. The air always smelled fresh and new, like the sky had just cried softly and cleaned the earth. The people of Ezoba were humble and generous. They shared their harvests, helped with each other's burdens, and always welcomed neighbors with wide smiles and kind eyes. Life moved gently in Ezoba. Children ran barefoot under the sun, giggling as they chased one another through dust and laughter. Women stirred large clay pots outdoors, releasing sweet smells of okra and smoked fish stew into the air. The men toiled proudly in their fields, their backs strong and hands skilled, returning with baskets heavy with cassava, garden eggs, and bitter leaf. But what made Ezoba especially cherished across many lands was its maidens. The girls of Ezoba were praised far and wide, for their charm seemed kissed by the gods. Their dark skin glistened like ripe tamarind under the sun. Their eyes sparkled like water in the morning light, and when they laughed, even the trees seemed to listen. Travelers often passed through Ezoba just to glimpse them, whispering, "No place under the stars is like Ezoba." Some even claimed the moon peeked out early just to see the maiden stroll by. Every dawn, the chirping of weaver birds awakened the village, and as dusk fell, the rhythm of talking drums echoed through the air, inviting everyone to gather by the fire and share tales. Peace lived in Ezoba, joy walked barefoot through its paths, and love rested in every breath the village took. In this bright world of warmth and music arrived a little girl named Ifananya, whose life had just been turned upside down. She was only 6, a child of songs and sun, who once danced barefoot through the forest trails, singing loudly as she followed her father, who climbed the tallest palm trees to gather fresh wine. Her father, known in their hometown Amurif as Okafor Nwans, was celebrated across neighboring villages. He was strong like Iroko wood, smiled like sunrise, and always returned with calabashes filled with sweet, bubbling palm wine that made the village elders nod in delight. But one morning, the laughter faded. Okafor had gone out before the cock crowed, climbing as he always did. No one knew just how it happened, only that the rope gave way, and he fell. The forest held its breath. Ifunanya had been sitting quietly beneath the big avocado tree when whispers arrived. Her mother clutched her close that night, and though Ifunanya's cheeks stayed dry, her eyes carried a silence they had never known before. Not long after, her mother began to weaken. First came the tiredness, then coughing that rattled her ribs like dry pods. She fought the illness with all her spirit, and the women of the village tried every herb, every prayer. But the sickness was stubborn. And one evening, as rain kissed the earth and thunder murmured far away, her mother squeezed her daughter's hand, exhaled slowly, and never breathed again. The villagers gathered, murmuring sadly. She was too small, too tender, to be alone. And so her mother's younger sister, Mama Ojima, who lived far away in Ezoba, came with a wrapper tied around her waist and love in her eyes. "Ifunanya will live with me," she said, hugging the girl tight. "She carries our blood, and my home is now hers." And just like that, Ifunanya left Amurif and followed her aunt to Ezoba, her heart hoping for safety and softness again. At first, the new home felt warm like midday sun. Mama Ojima wrapped her in new cloth, fed her warm millet porridge with honey, and spoke gently. Her husband, Papa Zabiru, had a calm voice and kind hands. He rested his palm on Ifunanya's head and whispered, "You are safe now. This house belongs to you, my child." Ojima and Zabiru had been together 10 years, a long stretch of time without a child. So when Ifunanya arrived, it felt like laughter had returned to a quiet room. "Papa," Zubairu would come home with roasted yam wrapped in leaves just for her. Mama Ojima combed and braided her hair, calling her my golden girl. Ifunanya's heart, though bruised, softened slowly. She missed her parents deeply, but she smiled again, sweeping the compound and singing softly as she worked. Each night, before sleep, she whispered, "Thank you, Creator, for a second home." But peace is a bird that doesn't always sit still. A few moons after Ifunanya came to Ezoba, the wind changed again. Mama Ojima began to wake late, her feet dragging, her eyes sleepy, and sometimes she would run behind the house and throw up. At first, she blamed too much pepper in her soup. But one hot afternoon, she sat on the carved wooden stool, placed her hand over her belly, and said, "Zubairu, something stirs inside me." Papa Zubairu turned slowly, looked at her, then at Ifunanya, then back at her. "You mean Ojima?" She nodded. Slowly, quietly, tears shimmered in Zubairu's eyes. After 10 years of long nights and hushed prayers, their hearts had been answered. He held her hands like they were the most precious things in the world. From her corner, Ifunanya watched but didn't fully understand. Papa Zubairu turned to her, beaming, and swept her into his arms. "Ifunanya," he said, "since you stepped into this house, joy followed your feet. You are truly a blessing." That night, they cooked rice and spicy goat sauce, and danced under the stars, spinning in their little courtyard like the moon was watching and smiling. As time flowed like the river nearby, a new cry entered the world one morning, a baby girl. Ojima had given birth. They named the baby Ngozi, which means blessing. The village women gathered, ululating and singing, "The heavens have done it again." The baby was wrapped in soft kente cloth, her tiny fingers curling around life. Ifunanya cradled Ngozi and sang lullabies, her voice like silk. Mama Ojima sometimes smiled at them both, calling them her twin stars, but slowly something shifted. Ojima's tone grew sharper. She frowned at Ifunanya over little things. "Why is the floor still dusty? Didn't I say to rinse Ngozi's clothes? You'll ruin the baby's things with those rough fingers." Ifunanya lowered her head, voice barely a breath. "I'm sorry, Mama." Even when she had done everything right, even when her hands moved like the wind from dawn till dusk, Ifunanya was treated as though she was invisible. She scrubbed, swept, washed, fetched water from the narrow stream, and stirred pots on firewood flames from morning until the stars began to blink, yet no one ever told her she was doing well. Ngozi, on the other hand, was a delicate flower, untouched by chores or scoldings. She was always lifted, kissed, praised. Mama Ojima called her my sunrise, even when the child kicked food across the floor or dropped sand into the soup pot. "She's just a baby," she would chuckle, like it was the funniest thing in the world. Meanwhile, Ifunanya was not allowed to play anymore. Her laughter had faded, her bare feet were always covered in dust, her eyelids drooped with tiredness, and yet she never complained. She only wished for peace in her heart. Only Papa Zubairu seemed to notice the sorrow in her silence. He would call her aside sometimes, his voice gentle like the river's whisper, and say, "Ifunanya, you carry goodness in you, don't let the world change that." He would quietly place roasted groundnuts into her palm and pat her back softly. But soon, even that small light began to flicker. Papa Zubairu started coughing, a dry, deep cough that seemed to come from somewhere, heavy inside. At first, everyone thought it was just the harmattan dust. But the cough grew worse, and he began to lie on his raffia mat more often, unable to speak, too tired to move. Mama Ojima, wrapped up in Ngozi's needs, barely noticed. So Ifunanya stepped in, carrying water for him to sip, cleaning his mat, wiping his brow when the fever made him sweat, and sitting beside him during long sleepless nights. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the tamarind trees, painting the sky orange and gold, Papa Zubeiru called her close. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thin as smoke. "You never stopped being kind." And then, with his hand still in hers, his eyes closed forever. Ifunanya sat there, holding his cooling fingers, her tears falling soundlessly like morning dew. That night, the house felt like a grave. It was too quiet, too empty, and the only sound left was the soft breaking of a young girl's heart. After Papa Zubeiru was gone, everything changed. The warm smile that had once welcomed her vanished. The gentle hand that had encouraged her no longer existed. And without him, no one stood between her and the storm. Mama Ojima's face hardened like sun-baked clay. Her words turned sharp, her gaze cold and heavy. She looked at Ifunanya as if the girl had brought bad luck. Ifunanya couldn't remember the last time her aunt had looked at her with kindness. Each new day became heavier than the last. She woke before the roosters crow while the stars still blinked, and tiptoed through the damp grass with an iron bucket balanced on her head. Her small feet carried her along the thorny stream path, weary and slow. By the time she returned, sweat drenched her dress, her arms trembled. "Where have you been?" Mama Ojima's voice would rise like thunder. "Lazy child, you think this house will clean itself?" Ifunanya said nothing. She simply dropped the bucket, picked up the broom, and got to work. She swept the courtyard, washed Ngozi's baby clothes, fetched firewood, pounded yam, cleaned pots blackened with soot, and cooked without ever tasting. All this she did before the sun climbed halfway into the sky. At night, while Ngozi was wrapped in soft cloth and fed warm, spicy soup, Ifunanya would sit on the edge of the room, chewing cold leftovers if there were any, sometimes only a spoon of rice or a slice of plain yam. Her belly often growled, but she stayed quiet. She slept on a thin mat near the smoky kitchen, a worn wrapper barely covering her legs as mosquitoes feasted on her tired body. When she made tiny mistakes like forgetting to warm the bathwater or leaving a spot unswept, Mama Ojima would whip her with broomsticks or slap her cheeks until they burned. Ifunanya bit her lips to stop the tears. Crying only made the anger worse, yet she did not lose her kindness. She still greeted elders with a bow, helped Mama Enelo carry her basket in the market, and gave children leftover firewood when they had none. Her palms had become rough like the bark of a baobab tree, but her heart was still soft as ripe mango. People began to notice. "That poor girl," women whispered as she passed by, her wrapper hanging loosely around her thin waist. "Living with the leopard." That's what they called Mama Ojima, the leopard, though never to her face. Behind closed doors, people spoke of how her voice could silence a gathering, and how even grown men avoided her when her temper flared, but no one ever dared question her. Not even the elders challenged her rage or her cutting tongue. So Ifunanya bore her suffering in silence. She prayed for dawn each night, and when morning came, she thanked the Creator for another breath. Her hope burned like a tiny oil lamp in a windy room. And though her days were heavy, she believed somewhere deep in her soul that something kinder might still be waiting ahead. Time moved like a crawling lizard, and years passed. Ngozi was no longer the bundle wrapped in soft cloth. She had grown into a young woman with glowing skin, long lashes, and a proud tilt to her chin, always waiting to be admired. Mama Ojima treated her like a queen, smoothing shea butter onto her legs and calling her my shining moon. "Rest, my diamond," she would say, fanning her gently in the afternoon heat. "Let the house girl handle the chores." That house girl was Ifunanya. And though life had not been easy, she had grown too. She blossomed in silence. Her beauty was not loud, but it glowed from within, peaceful and deep. Her clothes hung loose, her body thin from labor, but her voice remained sweet, her spirit still full of grace. While Ngozi slept long hours or preened before the small glass Papa Zubeiru once brought from the next village, Ifunanya was already sweeping the compound, her feet brushing against the earth like a quiet prayer. Water to heat, floors to scrub, meals to cook, and not a single cloth touched by Ngozi was ever left unwashed. Ifunanya did it all, every single day. Sometimes Ngozi would yawn lazily and say, "Ifunanya, is my bath water ready?" Or, "Don't forget, I want fried yam today." And Ifunanya, never raising her voice, would nod gently and reply, "Yes, Ngozi," before hurrying back to the smoky kitchen. She never complained, not even once. Ngozi, with her glistening earrings and painted nails, lived like a girl carved from coral and silk. "Stress is not for me," she would say with a smirk. "I was born to be adored." Mama Ojima would clap and laugh as if the words were the sweetest melody. "Yes, my darling," she'd coo. "You're royalty meant to be served, not to sweat like others." Ifunanya heard these words, and they struck her like small pebbles against the chest, but she held her breath and carried on. Her wrapper was always tight around her waist, her arms marked by the pot's heat, her legs aching, yet her lips always spoke the same steady replies. "Yes, Mama. Yes, Ngozi." Even Ngozi stopped calling her by name. She snapped her fingers, or said simply, "You there?" And Ifunanya came, head slightly bent, hands always working. In that household, Ngozi sparkled like sunlight on water, while Ifunanya, once the very breath of joy in their lives, melted quietly into the background, like smoke disappearing into sky. This rhythm carried on until one morning, unlike the others, the sun rose early that day, brighter and sharper, as if it were excited. It was the New Yam Festival, the grandest day in Ezoba. Every year, folks from far-off villages arrived to see the event, not only to honor the yam harvest, but also to witness the parade of young women dressed in their best, walking with poise and pride, heads lifted like queens. It was a day when young men traveled from distant lands, eyes wide, hoping to find a wife among the village's radiant daughters. Ezoba stirred with energy. Drums beat gently like a heartbeat. Mothers brushed their daughters' hair. Girls giggled while applying white clay to their cheeks and twisting coral beads into their plaits. In the middle of this joyful whirlwind, inside a small thatched room, Ngozi stood proudly. Mama Ojima wrapped her in a cloth with golden edges that shimmered when light kissed it. She rubbed her daughter's skin with palm oil until it glowed, combed her hair with care, and hung beads from her neck and wrists. "You are a vision," she said, smiling with pride. "Any man who lays eyes on you today will lose his breath." Ngozi smirked and posed before the wooden mirror. "He better come with gold and gifts, Mama. I won't waste my beauty on a poor man." Mama Ojima laughed loudly. "Today is yours, my star. The ancestors themselves are watching." In a quiet corner of the same house, Ifunanya picked up her oldest wrapper from the drying line. It had faded with time but was clean, freshly washed. She used a small comb to part her hair and tried to tie the cloth neatly around her waist. Maybe, just maybe, she could slip out quietly to the square. Not to compete, just to watch, just to breathe the festival air and remember, for one moment, what it was to feel like a girl. But just as she tiptoed toward the doorway, Mama Ojima's voice sliced the air like a blade. "Ifunanya, where do you think you're going?" Ifunanya froze. I just wanted to." "Did I not tell you to wash the clothes?" Mama Ojima barked. "And who gave you the right to wear that wrapper? Put it down this instant and get back to work." Swallowing her shame, Ifunanya nodded. "Yes, Mama," she whispered, and changed without a word. That wrapper wasn't for her, not today. Instead of walking to the village square like the other girls, she went to the backyard, filled her calabash with water, scrubbed the soot-blackened pots, and began washing Ngozi's pile of wrappers. As she looked up, she saw Ngozi walking proudly away, hips swaying, golden cloth blazing in the sun. Like fire, Ifunanya stood behind the wall, watching quietly. She did not cry. She only picked up the next dish and began scrubbing, her heart folding inward like cloth left too long in the rain. Mama Ojima stood nearby with arms crossed, ensuring every minute was spent working. Meanwhile, Ezoba danced. Music echoed like thunder through the hills. Girls twirled, boys cheered, and joy spilled into every corner. But in a quiet compound on the edge of the village, a girl worked with hands as soft as her sorrow, her beauty hidden, her glow unseen. The New Yam Festival ended with roars of laughter and drums that rattled the night. But by morning, word had spread faster than wind through palm leaves. Ngozi, the girl in gold, was the jewel of the festival. Young girls covered their lips. But no one was more shocked than Ngozi and Mama Ojima. Mama Ojima sat stunned on her stool, her wrapper loose around her waist, her hands trembling. "She is queen now," she murmured. Ngozi's face flushed. Red with rage, she stood, fists tight. "No," she snapped. "No. I am more beautiful than her. I'm the real princess. I will marry a king, one richer, more powerful. I will show her I am better." Mama Ojima didn't speak. Her eyes stayed on the earth, weighed down with regret. Meanwhile, far away, Ifunanya stood tall beside Chima, her heart full not with pride, but with peace. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. And not even gold could shine brighter than that. Back in Ezoba, Ngozi couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ifunanya seated on a throne, coral beads shining, her head gently bowed under a golden crown. The image burned like hot oil in her chest. "She was my maid," Ngozi would cry. "How can she wear a crown? And I do not?" Every morning she sat before her mirror, adjusting her hair, painting her lips, whispering to herself, "I'm still the most beautiful. I was born to be queen." Then one day, her desire seemed to take shape. A stranger rode into Ezoba, trumpets blaring, drums thundering behind him. His name was Prince Obadike. He arrived with more than 100 servants. His garments glittered with gold, his horses tall and strong. His skin was smooth, his smile wide and charming. "Who is this noble man?" The villagers whispered. "I have heard of great beauty in this land," Prince Obadike announced, his voice deep like rolling clouds. "I have come to choose a bride." Ngozi didn't wait. She ran to fetch her finest wrapper, oiled her skin till it gleamed, and stepped out with her chin high and hips swaying. When the prince saw her, he grinned. "You," he said. "You are the one." Ngozi nearly fainted. Mama Ojima danced. "In circles, this is our moment," she screamed. "We will shine brighter than Ifunanya." Without delay, she accepted the prince's proposal, ignoring the murmurs of elders. "Something is wrong with that man," they whispered, but no one listened. The wedding happened fast, and soon they set off for Obadike's kingdom, over 130. Servants trailing behind, the journey began with laughter. Ngozi rode atop a grand horse, gold glittering from her wrists, smiling with triumph. "Now look at me," she whispered. "A queen finer than Ifunanya." But after a few hours, things began to change. One by one, the servants vanished. "Where are they going?" Ngozi asked, puzzled. Prince Obadike would only smile. "Don't worry, my queen, we are almost home." By nightfall, only a few remained. They stopped to make camp. Ngozi tried to sleep, but the air was thick and heavy. Then she heard whispers beyond the trees. "It's time to eat her," one of the prince's men said with a growl. Her heart froze. Her hands trembled. She turned to Prince Obadike and saw a face twisted in horror. His smile had vanished. His eyes glowed red, and his body began to stretch. Before her very eyes, he transformed into a beast. Long teeth, wild claws, his roar shook the trees. Ngozi screamed and ran, but it wasn't just him. His remaining men also changed, their bodies sprouting fur, fangs gleaming. They chased her through the dark forest, growling like wild dogs. Ngozi ran faster than she ever had, her elegant wrapper tearing on thorny branches. Her golden earrings tumbled into the dirt, forgotten. For the first time in her life, there was no mirror, no soft mat beneath her, no proud laughter echoing in. Her ears only the sound of beasts behind her and the pounding of her own fear. In that terrifying moment, Ngozi understood. She had chased after gold, but gold had chased her back in the form of a monster. She ran blindly through the thick forest, thorns clawing at her arms, her feet bleeding on jagged stones, her breath coming in ragged gasps like war drums beating inside her chest. Behind her, the heavy steps and growls of the creature she once called her prince thundered like a storm. She didn't know where she was running, only that she had to live. Just as her knees began to buckle, a sharp crack split the night. A gunshot. The growls stopped. A commanding voice shouted, "Stay behind me." Through her blurred vision, Ngozi saw a tall figure with steady hands, holding a long rifle. Another shot rang out. The beast snarled and slinked back into the forest's shadowed belly. The hunter didn't ask questions. He simply gave her water, helped her up, and led her to a small hut tucked beneath whispering trees. She collapsed on a woven mat and slept for the first time in days. When she awoke, the gold was gone. Her regal wrappers were shredded. Her skin was pale, her hands trembled. She was just Ngozi, nothing more, and for the first time, she truly saw herself. "I chased a crown," she murmured to the hunter, but ran straight into a curse. He didn't speak much, only nodded with quiet wisdom and said, "Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters." After a few days, Ngozi returned to Ezoba, but the village didn't look at her the same. People paused as she passed thin, hunched, her steps dragging like broken wind. Whispers followed her like dry leaves. "Is that Ngozi? Where's her prince? What happened to her gold?" Then came the quiet voice of an old woman under the big tree by the market. "Not all that glitters is gold." This time, Ngozi didn't toss her head or sneer. She only nodded and kept walking. She didn't ask for her mirror. She didn't reach for her beads. She sat quietly on a wooden stool, her arms wrapped around herself. Mama Ojima gasped when she saw her. "My child," she whispered, placing trembling hands on her cheeks. But Ngozi said nothing. That evening, Mama Ojima sat outside in silence, staring at the fading sun, her heart weighed down with memories. She remembered Ifananya, the girl she had yelled at, beaten, shamed. The same girl who now wore the real crown. Tears slipped down her face as she whispered, "I chased pride and drove away grace." For the first time in her life, Mama Ojima felt the bitter taste of true regret. And deep inside, she wished she had chosen to be a kinder woman before it was too late. While sorrow and silence settled like mist over Ezoba, far away in the calm kingdom of Ndiolu, Ifunanya and Chima lived in quiet joy. Their days passed in laughter, shared meals, and soft walks along flower-lined paths. "You are my peace," Chima would often say, pressing her hand gently in his. "And you are my home," she would reply, her eyes full of love. They were not the loudest rulers, nor the most decorated, but their reign was marked by truth and tenderness. Each morning, Ifunanya rose early not to fetch firewood or scrub pots, but to greet her people with humility. The same soft voice that once whispered, "Yes, Mama," now spoke kindness that brought joy to others. Children gathered around her like chicks to a warm hen. Women admired her grace. Men respected her calm wisdom. She had become the kind of queen that no jewels could create, a queen sculpted by suffering and softened by love. Back in Ezoba, Ngozi listened to stories from travelers. They spoke of how Queen Ifananya walked barefoot among the poor, how she served food with her own hands, how she embraced every soul with dignity. Something inside Ngozi shifted. One day, She sat beside the same mirror she used to worship and whispered to her reflection, "Beauty is empty without kindness." Her eyes filled not with anger, but sorrow, not for what she had lost, but for what she had allowed herself to become. Mama Ojima, now older, slower, and bowed by years, could no longer sleep easily. Regret clung to her like smoke. One cool morning, she wrapped herself in plain cloth and walked the long road to Ndiolu. She carried no gifts. When she arrived, the guards raised their brows but let her through. Ifunanya, now seated on a woven mat in the sun, rose when she saw her. Mama Ojima fell to her knees, her voice trembling. "I wronged you, Ifunanya. I hurt you. I mocked you. And still, you became more than I ever dreamed. Please, forgive me." The court fell silent. Ifunanya walked slowly to her, took her gently by the arms, and raised her to her feet. She looked into her eyes and said, "I have carried many wounds, but I will not carry bitterness. I forgive you." Mama Ojima broke down in sobs. She stayed only a short while, then returned to Ezoba, not healed, but carrying a sliver of peace. As for Ngozi, she never married again. The pride that had pushed true love away left her alone with her thoughts. She remained in the house with her mother, not the girl in gold, but simply Ngozi, quiet, watching, remembering, and far from all the noise. Ifunanya sat with Chima, her head resting on his shoulder. There was no mirror in her chamber. She didn't need one, because she finally knew who she was. And that was enough.